I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest.
Joe Biden!
It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
This is, again, an attempt by Donald Trump to distract from the real issues of this campaign.
I'm going to punch him out, and I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to be happy.
It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Once again, my heartfelt thank you goes out to all of you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to a new week of Divided We Fall. We find ourselves closer to the brink of war than we've been in recent years. So I'd be remiss if I didn't take a little more time to talk about the goings-on in Israel since last episode and how it has contributed to our division, both as a nation and across the globe. Divided We Fall will always be brought to you by AR Tactical LLC, Houston's finest concierge firearms company. They bring FFL transfers, LTC classes, and firearms proficiency training to you at your home, office, church, or wherever you're most comfortable. So go find them on Facebook and give them a like at AR Tactical LLC or call 346-465-5994 to discover how they can cater a class to your needs today. This is episode 6, Why Borders Are Important. Since we talked last week, the world has rallied into two distinct teams. And I do mean world, not just here at home. Across the globe, we're seeing rallies in every civilized country. The two teams, of course, are pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. Before I even get to the politicians, I can point out the multitude of public figures who suddenly feel like their opinion should be thrust upon the world. Some have pronounced unwavering support for Israel, like WWE wrestler turned movie megastar Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who said, "I don't pretend to know everything about the complex conflict of the Middle East. It commands deep understanding, context, and nuance. What I do know is hateful acts of terrorism like these are never justified." Wonder Woman star Gal Gadot, who herself served in the Israeli Defense Forces in her 20s, was quoted as saying, "I stand with Israel. You should too. The world cannot sit on the fence when these horrific acts of terror are happening." Meanwhile, the responses of others were a little more measured and center of the road. Linda Carter, for instance, the original Wonder Woman, tweeted this: "Millions of Israelis and Palestinians have worked so hard to end the cycle of violence, only to see it escalate. Beyond governments engaged in conflict, there are people crying out for an end to the human suffering that has gone on for many generations. Nothing we say as we sit safely in our homes and far away from the conflict can really capture how much of a tragedy this is." You notice how she tries to convey compassion without really taking a side. You think maybe she's worried about that cancel culture we talked about a few weeks ago? Meanwhile, other quote-unquote celebrities, such as former porn actress Mia Khalifa, well, she had this to say. Whoa. Sorry. Wrong Mia Khalifa clip. What she actually said was, "Can someone please tell the freedom fighters in Palestine to flip their phones and film horizontal?" Which, once she received some pushback, she further clarified, "I just want to make it clear that this statement in no way, shape, or form is inciting spread of violence. I specifically said freedom fighters because that's what the Palestinian citizens are, fighting for freedom every day." Freedom fighters. The Hamas terrorists are freedom fighters. I believe anybody who listened to last week's episode knows how I feel about calling a bunch of terrorist thugs freedom fighters. And you can probably imagine what I think Miss Khalifa can do with her opinion. Yep, that's about right. And how about our favorite twits up in Washington? What have they been up to this week? Well, misinformation, and lots of it. When a hospital in Gaza was seemingly attacked, initial reports said it was bombed by an Israeli airstrike, killing 500 innocent civilians. The talking heads in the squad were right there to lay on the anti-Israeli rhetoric, pointing out how cowardly it was for Israel to perpetrate such an attack on innocent civilians. Twat Waffles, Tlaib, and Omar immediately took to Twitter, or X. I still can't think of it as just X, but anyways. Tlaib tweeted, Israel just bombed the Baptist hospital, killing 500 Palestinians, doctors, children, patients, just like that. At POTUS, this is what happens when you refuse to facilitate a ceasefire and help de-escalate. Your war and destruction-only approach has opened my eyes and many Palestinian Americans and Muslim Americans like me. We will remember where you stood. Omar lambasted the president by adding, bombing a hospital is among the gravest of war crimes. The IDF reportedly blowing up one of the few places the injured and wounded can seek medical treatment and shelter during a war is horrific. But wait a minute. In another odd show of solidarity with Israel while he funnels money to Iran and Hamas, Mushmouth himself came out saying American intelligence agreed that Israel was not to blame for the hospital's explosion after all.
Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears a result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza.
Israel claims this video shows that happening and says aerial images of the aftermath do not show a crater, which would be expected after an airstrike.
Israel even released a supposedly intercepted audio file in which it claims two Hamas bottom-feeding terrorists can be heard discussing the explosion was the result of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket, the PIJ being another of the lovely boys and girls clubs of the innocent Palestinian people.
ايه انه من عندنا هذا مين اللي بيقول هيك ايش بتقول سبحان الله من عندنا ما رجعش غيرين بجرثبي ايه هو في مقبره وراه.
What, you couldn't follow that conversation? Well, you'll just have to check out the video link in the description below to read the entire transcript. While Tlaib has yet to walk back her repugnant remarks, Omar at least followed with another tweet that read, it is a reminder that information is often unreliable and disputed in the fog of war, especially on Twitter where misinformation is rampant. We all have a responsibility to ensure information we are sharing is from credible sources and to acknowledge as new reports come in. In a rare moment of praise for the brother-marrying immigrant, I'll say, well, at least she made an effort. Meanwhile, outside the Capitol, a pro-Palestinian protest turned into what was called an insurrection when Trump supporters did it. Hundreds of Palestinian supporters gathered outside the U.S. Capitol to make their voices heard. But when they wanted more attention and more news coverage, they decided to enter the people's house. These protesters didn't have doors open for them like we saw in certain videos from January 6th. They assaulted 3 police officers as they bullied their way into the Capitol Rotunda, and then even tried to breach the doors where the House was currently holding a vote to elect a speaker. So, they injured law enforcement, they entered the Rotunda, and then they attempted to interfere with an official government proceeding. Do any of these allegations sound familiar? Do they sound exactly like what the January 6th defendants are accused of? Or have they even been found guilty of? Where's the outrage? Where's the round-the-clock news coverage calling this an insurrection? How many of these insurrectionists are going to be tracked down and arrested by the FBI, to be thrown into solitary confinement for months on end without being charged with a crime? Why is it okay for one group, but not for another? And even more disturbing, why do we continue to allow this two-tiered justice system? While that's a subject for another episode, it does lead us to this week's Hypocrite of the Week.
Sitting down, and this is not uncommon for protests on Capitol Hill. A lot of times they are cited, they are taken to a jail cell that is right there on the property. They're given a citation, which varies in dollar amount, and then they are released. This is considered, of course, civil disobedience for the First Amendment. But again, there they are.
There they are, getting their citations and being released, while January 6th protesters practicing their First Amendment rights are still in jail awaiting trial in violation of their Sixth Amendment protected right to a speedy trial. Same offense, different punishments, based solely on political affiliation. And that's why the U.S. justice system, and specifically the Capitol Police, are this week's Hypocrite of the Week. Now, the United States has a long-standing relationship with the nation of Israel, having been the first country to acknowledge the Jewish state after its forming in 1948. Since then, we have always seen them as our closest ally in the Middle East. We've always kind of been the big brother to assist them when they're in need. This latest conflict is no different. Already, the U.S. has pledged $10 billion to aid Israel in this current war with Hamas. These monies are earmarked for, among other things, new munitions to replenish the Israeli Iron Dome missile defense system. This defense system protects the Jewish state from, border crossings by rockets in the sky. They're also to implement physical border deterrence to prevent further incursions by terrorists into Israeli-controlled territory. Strengthening the border? What a novel concept. Just as an aside, but in a fun little display, the queen of the squad, AOC, the scarecrow still looking for a brain, she put on an absolutely Oscar-worthy performance when she burst into tears on the House floor after the House voted 420-9 to approve the $1 billion simply for the replenishment of the Iron Dome we were just talking about. You can catch her act about the 10-second mark in the link in the video description below. But this latest aid package doesn't just contain money for Israel. The Biden administration is once again asking for more money to be sent over to the money laundromat, Ukraine. This represents the bulk of the totaled $100 million request the administration is sending to Congress for approval. And what are the focal points in Ukraine? What areas are we hoping our monies will go to assisting? Humanitarian aid? Military armaments? Nope. You guessed it. Ukrainian border security. You cannot make this shit up, folks. The same administration that called the Trump border wall barbaric, racist, and xenophobic is sending billions of American taxpayer money to secure the borders of other nations. Why? Because contrary to what they would have you believe when they give their tear-jerking, feel-good migrant speeches on TV, they know that border security is paramount to the sovereignty of a nation. So we're spending billions of dollars to secure the borders of both Israel and Ukraine, voted on and approved overwhelmingly in our own House of Representatives. But how about America's border?
Concerns over the crisis at the border are intensifying as migrants surge across from Mexico. Sources say nearly 9,000 migrants were apprehended at the border in one single day. That's the highest number since May, leaving officials struggling to cope. The head of the Border Patrol says everybody is overwhelmed. He spoke exclusively to ABC's Matt Rivers at the border.
This isn't sustainable. This is up and down the system. Everybody is overwhelmed.
It sure seems like we could use some of those billions of dollars being spent elsewhere right here at home. In August of 2023 alone, the U.S. Border Patrol recorded over 181,000 encounters between ports of entry along the southwest border. Illegal border crossers since 2021 total more than the individual populations of 38 states in the United States. That's right. Since President Biden has been in office, illegal crossings total more than 8 million. 8 million people have flooded our country, while we've been sending billions of dollars away for other countries to secure their borders. The Biden administration would have you believe that their cell phone program, wherein they give illegal immigrants free cell phones as they're processed, has been successful in keeping track of migrants while waiting for hearings. But of the 8 million people who've entered our country since Dunderhead took the oath of office, can anybody tell me how many are currently being tracked through either the cell phone giveaways or through ankle monitors?
Anyone? 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 Anyone?
100,000. 1.25%. Billions of dollars spent in other countries to secure their borders from foreign invasion. Meanwhile, here, we can only account for 1.25% of the illegal border crossers who've been admitted to our country. Most of those we track are here awaiting the verdict of an asylum claim. Now, lest we forget that international treaty states that asylum seekers are to make their claims in the next safe country from the one they're fleeing. The top 8 nations whose refugees are seeking asylum in the U.S., in order from number 1 down: Venezuela, People's Republic of China, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Egypt, India, then Mexico. Granted, it's been a while since I took 9th grade geography, but I'm pretty sure that only one of those share a border with the U.S. The others shouldn't even be eligible to claim asylum here. Now, before you go calling me heartless, racist, xenophobic, I have no issues with true asylees coming here to take advantage of the American dream who do so legally. For that matter, I don't care if they're not even trying to make an asylum claim, just trying to migrate here, but legally. That's what this nation is built on. We pride ourselves on being the melting pot, where ideas from around the globe can be shared and integrated into American productivity by legal migrants. But how many of those numbers I just talked about from the People's Republic of China could be CCP plants? Those are just the ones we know about. How many thousands or millions maybe are even those that got away from Border Patrol? Border Patrol themselves admit that for every one they catch, an alleged 10 more make it across without being detected. The whole world watched last week when, following Hamas's initial attack, Muslims around the world were dancing in the streets, chanting, "Death to Israel, death to America." How many of those jihadis, who, by the way, blend in really well with South Americans, have come across our southern border, are lying in wait to attack us on our own soil? How is it people don't see the issue of us spending billions of dollars on other countries' borders while ignoring our own? Why is it okay for us to send arms and munitions to aid Ukraine in repelling a Russian invasion onto their soil, but it's xenophobic to try and stop the swell of illegal crossings onto our own? Now, I know the immigration system to get into our country legally is broken. I have seen friends go through the naturalization process. It's a long, drawn-out, bureaucratic, red tape-filled process. I know it needs to be revamped. But the vast majority of those coming across the southern border wouldn't even come the legal way if we offered an expedited process. That's why they don't come through the legal ports of entry. They come in through the cartel tunnels of Arizona. They come across the Rio Grande in the dead of night in Texas. They hide out in trains and trucks crossing into California. The law is irrelevant to a great majority of these people, yet our government looks the other way. Even the so-called conservative governor of my own state of Texas used my tax dollars not to repel immigrants crossing illegally. No. He used my money to process them and then give them a bus ride further into the country. Now, he did drop them off on the doorsteps of so-called sanctuary cities. Even those mayors and governors who used to pat themselves on the back for being sanctuary cities are beginning to realize that the situation is untenable. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, who used to sound like this.
As the mayor of the city of New York, I don't, weigh into immigration issues, border issues. I have to provide services for families that are here, and that's what we're going to do. And that's what our responsibility as a city. I'm proud that this is a right to shelter state, and we're going to continue to do that.
Has suddenly changed his tune, and now feels a little more like this.
Let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
Those of you who might sit on the left side of the political aisle might ask, why is this an issue? What's the harm in taking in those less fortunate than us? Isn't that the Christian way? Well, of course it is. And I truly believe in helping my fellow man as the Bible commands. But that doesn't mean we have to put ourselves in harm's way to do so. This is a much bigger issue than just breaking some laws, though. The large caravans of illegals we've been seeing since the inauguration of Uncle Joe have to be receiving support. I mean, how is it possible that a supposed broke refugee from San Miguel, El Salvador, walks more than 1,400 miles to Brownsville, Texas, over a period of 25-plus days in the heat through the deserts of Mexico with nothing but the shirt on his back, and arrives here at the border with clean shoes, clean clothes, he's gained weight since he left, he's clean, and he's freshly showered? How is that possible? The answer is one I've touched on before: globalism. You've heard our politicians speak the quiet parts out loud for years now. You just didn't know it.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
There's going to be a new world order out there.
A new world order.
Globalization.
Globalism. The new world order. The desire of a group of elites who wanted the entire world under one world government. Once called a conspiracy theory, it's been increasingly discussed now in top circles and gatherings. But what does globalism have to do with the immigrant crisis here at home? When I mentioned the support those immigrants had to make it thousands of miles in pristine condition, well, they're taken care of along the way, most often bused, but sometimes even flown by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, seemingly charitable organizations, usually under the name of some Christian or charitable-sounding name, like the Christian Aid Organization or the Safe Passage Project. These organizations are often funded by grants provided to them by people like Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, Larry Fink. The why of it takes a little more explanation. The majority of Americans on both sides of the aisle, despite what the legacy media tells us, would vehemently oppose a global government takeover of our way of life. Undoubtedly, we've become rather attached to the freedoms that we still enjoy here in America. And as I've said for the past few weeks now, if faced with the option of a forced compliance with global governance, I know we would unite to fight against any such takeover. And as I've been repeating for weeks now, united, we can overcome any obstacle. So, how does adding millions of illegal immigrants factor into the mix? In 1966, two American sociologists and professors from Columbia University, Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, penned an article in the liberal publication The Nation, titled The Weight of the Poor, A Strategy to End Poverty. In it, they theorized that it was possible to bring down a system of government by overburdening its welfare system. The Cloward-Piven strategy, as it came to be known, quote, proposed to create a crisis in the current welfare system by exploiting the gap between welfare law and practice that would ultimately bring about its collapse and replace it with a system of guaranteed annual income. They hope to accomplish this end by informing the poor of their rights to welfare assistance, encouraging them to apply for benefits, and, in effect, overload an already overburdened bureaucracy. End quote. Once overloaded and collapsed, Cloward and Piven put forth that a new socialist form of government could be introduced, embracing a universal income. A socialist utopia ripe for the picking and begging for the rescue of a global economy. What better way to overload a welfare system to the point of collapse than by introducing 8 million new enrollees? I'm not saying every person who crosses illegally will end up on welfare, but it's an easy bet the vast majority will. And once again, we pull back the curtain to reveal another form of control. This is not only from outside our government, but embraced often by those we call our representatives who currently serve, bought and paid for by Klaus Schwab and his band of globalists. It's not a theory. You can trace his campaign donations on both sides of the aisle and see who he owns. You can watch them as they call those of us who want stricter border policies racists. You can tell them by the phony pictures they stage at the border, crying while looking at the cages that Obama built and instituted, by the way. And now, hopefully, you see why keeping track of who comes across our border is so important. Hopefully now you can see we're not racists. We just care deeply about the sovereignty of our great country. Hopefully now you can see that enacting border security could very well be protecting the future of our republic. And if we stay united on the topic, we can vote our way to a secure border. United, we can vote change into our overburdensome legal immigration procedures. United, we can repel any advancements by a globalist agenda to take over our country and replace the God-given freedoms we enjoy and our Constitution protects with socialism. But not if we're divided. Not if we let them continue to divide us over an issue that should matter to all of us. Not if we continue to listen to them and believe them when they call us racists, or our friends across the aisle bleeding hearts. That kind of rhetoric only serves to further the division between us as Americans. And once again, my friends, as the title says, divided we fall. Thanks again for checking out this week's Divided We Fall. All of the links for audio clips used in today's episode are in the video description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new episode comes out each week. Make sure you share with your friends so we can get the word out that it's time to be united. See you next week.